Bill, if we could start with you. You're a foundational figure here in developing the field of venture capital. And your story, as I remember, began with you coming here and working with your father and driving around the orchards and looking for companies. Tell us about those early days.
Yeah, it was 1959, and when I got out here, Stanford was, of course, a wonderful place to be near, and Palo Alto was a little town, and Mountain View and all those Sunnyvale was mostly orchards and very informal. And there were a couple of bankers in San Francisco, but none of them would touch small businesses without security. And so when we started the venture capital business of Draper, Gaither and Anderson, Rao and Gaither was a lawyer here with Cooley. It was Cooley, Growley, Gaither in that time, and my father and
General Anderson.
Anderson was the a general in the Air Force, and got to know my father when the two of them were running the Marshall Plan in Paris. And Averell Harriman had suggested Anderson leave London, where he had been head of the 8th Bomber Command. There's a movie, 12 O'Clock High, written about that whole experience of sending bombers over to Berlin. And Anderson was my dad's deputy there, and they ran it together about 3 years or thereabouts. And Averell Harriman was in charge of the Marshall Plan from Washington, but they were on the ground in Europe. And the two of them had both been to the Bay Area. My dad had been an investment banker, and he had run the financing for the Oakland Bay Bridge and had gotten to know the Bay Area that way. And Anderson had been with up in Travis Air Force Base north of San Francisco. So they both thought this is the place to come and start this venture capital business, which nobody in the Bay Area ever heard of before. They didn't know the term venture capital. And it was a unique, interesting early period. And when I came out as one of 5 guys to join that firm, I had no idea what was coming here in the Valley, and that it would be known worldwide as Silicon Valley. And I just feel lucky to have had the right father. You didn't do quite as well, but
and she really had trouble.
Oh, goodness.
She had to overcome all sorts of things.
Well, thanks, Phil. You, of course, were not only with that firm, but also started your own with Sutter, and then we're pioneering and working in India. And let's fast forward then to Tim, where when you came on the scene with tell us what was the context with what was going on in the Valley and the genesis for you starting your venture capital.
Well, I actually wanted to be an entrepreneur, but then I kept coming up with new ideas for businesses, and I thought, oh boy, this isn't going to work for me, because if I've already come up with 4 ideas for businesses, I'm never going to be able to stick with just one. And then I realized that what these guys had been doing all that time was just exactly what I wanted to do. And I got very excited about it. And well, I finished business school and came back to work at Alex Brown & Sons for a year. And that job was part venture capital, part investment banking. And after a year, I decided to come. Dad had gone off to Washington and then to work at the Exim Bank.
Right, Exim Bank.
And then he had gone to New York to run the UN development program. And so he had this SBIC, a small business investment company that he had set up. And it was valued at about $2 million. I'm not sure it ended up being worth $2 million, but it was valued at $2 million.
After you took over, I think at least we got something out of it.
But I was able to
family
borrow.
business. It was just a small family.
So I was able to borrow $6 million against that from the federal government. And I remember going to Washington and talking to Marvin Clapp, who ran the SBIC program. I think he ran it alone at that time, or he was maybe one of 2 or 3 people who ran this program.
Right.
Now there are 600 people, and they run roughly the same number of SBICs as Marvin Clapp did all by himself.
The commentary on our times with government.
But, yeah, a little comment there. But I remember going to Marvin, and he's going through the checklist, and he says, so you need 10 years of investment experience. And I said, oh, perfect. I've been investing since I was 10. And he goes, check. And so I took over the SBIC. I borrowed that $6 million, and I put it to work. And about 3 years later, Dad loves to tell this story, it looked really bad. Bunch of companies had gone out of business. Things were not great. And then the IPO window opened up, and I suddenly had 5 IPOs, and one was Parametric Technology. And by the way, the SBIC program had come to me 3 years in, and they'd come to me and said, "You're on our watch list." And I said, "What's that?" And they said, "Well, you've already dropped below some of our ratios." And I said, "Oh, okay, what does that mean?" "Well, nothing right now." And then they called me back about 3 months later and said, "Now you're on our dirt list, and we're going to call the loan." And I went back to Washington and I said, "You can't call this loan. There's some good stuff in here," whatever. Anyway, so I was on their dirt list, and they agreed not to call the loan. And then all these companies started to go public, and Parametric really took off. And I went from their dirt list to on the wall, Venture Capitalist of the Year, SBIC Venture Capitalist of the Year, and my picture was there. And so, your fortunes can go up and down and up and down. Anyway, that was the beginning. And then I brought on some partners who were way smarter than I am. John Fisher, Steve Jurvetson, Andreas Stravopoulos, Jennifer Fonstad. They all made a big impact, and we built a really incredible venture firm. And we were really at the total top of our game about in 2000 certainly in 1999.
All of us were at the top of the game in '99.
But in 2004, we had Skype and Baidu, and no one else had anything. And so we were sort of at the top there.
We see here the Mutual Defense Assistance Act. So this seems like something that was signed in addition to the Marshall Plan to give more money here. Okay, so it's a United States Act signed by President Harry Truman on October 6, 1949. It was the first U.S. military foreign aid. So here it is, money, right? Legislation of Cold War era, initially to Europe. The act followed Truman's signing of the Economic Cooperation Act, the Marshall Plan, on April 3rd, 1948, which provided non-military economic reconstruction and development aid to Europe. Okay, so this is it. They're providing this aid to Europe, and who's going to head this? As told by us a while ago, was Draper's granddaddy. And we'll look at the Marshall Plan here as well. So was an American initiative enacted in 1948 to provide foreign aid to Western Europe. The United States transferred $13.3 billion At 33, that's quite the number there. So 13.3 billion, equivalent to 173 billion in 2023 in economic recovery programs to Western Europe and economies after the end of World War II. So let me tell you the committee that Draper put together to do this. I'm going to bring that tab up. Just give me a second here.
No problem.
So we already see with Mr. Gaither there, they're connected to Ford. We're also going to see here they're connected to Dodge as well. So seems like they had a pretty big presence here in the Detroit area, the birth of cars. But of course, with World War II, we know that GM and Ford did do things where they sold vehicles and stuff to both sides.
Knowing that, guys, if this is your first time tuning in, Rue is from Detroit. So there you go.
Yes, indeed. So when I hear the names Ford and Dodge, it really takes me back to my roots there in Detroit. Draper Committee was a partisan committee created in October 1958 by Dwight Eisenhower to undertake a completely independent, objective, and nonpartisan analysis of military assistance aspects of the 1948 Mutual Defense Act. So the way this is written, it seems as if they're providing like overseeing if everything was spent right, but it seems to me like this was the actual committee that did the spending. So you can see here William Henry Draper Jr., board chairman of the Mexican Light and Power Company, which I went and looked them up. We might not talk about them today, but they're a Canadian-owned Mexican light and power company. So a Canadian-owned company that controls light and power in Mexico, if you can believe that. But that's what it is.
Wow.
Dillian Anderson, Houston lawyer, one-time presidential national security advisor. Joseph M. Dodge, Detroit banker, one-time budget director. I'm sure related to the Dodge family. When you think of, the Dodge trucks, the Dodge Ram, and all of that. Alfred Maximilian Grunther, Marx Leva, John J. McCloy, George C. McGahee, and some other names here. So these guys were responsible for all that money. And in doing that, they had to work with the Export-Import Bank of the United States. Now, understand, this is like the actual, factual, true Bank of America, like the for real Bank of America. So Export-Import Bank of the United States is the official credit export agency of the United States federal government, operating as a wholly owned federal government corporation. The bank assists in financing and facilitating U.S. exports of goods and services. Okay, particularly when private sector lenders are unable or unwilling to provide financing. So they're providing literally American funds to oversee stuff. And just to kind of further drive that point home, the Export-Import Bank was established in 1934 as the Export-Import Bank of Washington. So Washington, District of Columbia. So literally, this is the Bank of America. By executive order of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, his stated goal was to aid in financing and to facilitate exports and imports and the exchange of commodities, cryptocurrencies. So early on, Draper and Draper's father, or Draper's grandfather and Draper's father, were involved in the bank that controls the exchange of export, imports, and commodities between the United States and other nations or agencies of nationals thereof. Okay. Now, if we scroll down, what we're going to see here is post-World War II reconstruction and the Marshall Plan. So Draper had to work hand in hand with this bank in order to get things done to rebuild Europe. Okay. The XIM played a critical role in the years during and beginning the end of the Lend-Lease. So a policy
I
under which, go ahead.
don't think you had that that tab up. Just get heads up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No worries.
So
We're following along. But I just want for people that want the visual.
okay, so just to recap, this is the actual Bank of America, and just to recap this one thing that you should see here. The president, Franklin Delano, or 1934 as the Export-Import Bank of Washington. So Export-Import Bank of Washington, D.C. This literally makes it kind of the Bank of America. And just to read this because it's important, to aid in the financing and to facilitate exports and imports and the exchange of commodities, right, like cryptocurrencies, between the United States and other nations or the agencies of nationals thereof. And then we scroll down here and see post-World War II reconstruction and the Marshall Plan. It worked hand in hand with William Draper Jr. or William Draper II to get things done in Europe. So it played a critical role in the years between the end of the Lend-Lease, and they say the Lend-Lease is a policy to promote the defense of the United States. Okay, so basically probably World War II spending, because this is September 1945. In the beginning of the Marshall Plan, which is the end of World War II, where they're now rebuilding Europe. And the World Bank, also here, the World Bank's first authorizations. Now, I know Max has covered the World Bank and talked about the World Bank tons of times to you guys. So it started here with these guys. And Draper's grandfather is right in the thick of this. So at the end of World War II, it was recognized that the U.S. did not have a credit faculty capable of handling the demand that would result in the cessation of hostilities. One of the major rationales behind the Import-Export Bank of 1945, the basis of the XLM's current charter document was its necessity. Basically, they're saying this necessity to reconstruct Europe, to dramatically increase XIM's lending capacity to adequately respond to Europe's post-war reconstruction needs. Okay, so basically, the Import-Export Bank of 1945 increased lending authority from 750 million to 3.5 billion. And of course, we saw over in the other Wikipedia article about the Marshall Plan, they actually said it was 13.3 billion. So whether it was 13.3 billion or 3.5 billion, that was a ton of money in this time. Okay. Scroll down here. So after the Marshall Plan, where they basically offered credit to France, Denmark, Norway, Belgium, the Netherlands, Turkey, Czechoslovakia, Finland, Italy, Ethiopia, Greece, Poland, and Austria, they all agreed to purchase equipment, facilities, and services from the United States. So basically, all the different guys that you're hearing about, like, then this makes the whole and total a lot of sense. Like the Rand Corporation, the Ford, Dodge, and GM, all of these guys are getting paid to rebuild Europe after this war. The financing, and of course Draper the second had his own venture capital firm, so he's getting paid to build these businesses to rebuild Europe. The financing was designed to aid and reconstruct nations and repair their import-export capability. Again, like kind of cross-border payments, right? Through the purchase of new machinery, currency exchange, There it is right there. And improvements and repairs to infrastructure and transportation systems. Okay. So that's it right there. But now if we kind of bring this forward, and I talked about this a lot on a crypto futures channel, but let's go ahead and talk about it here because I think it's going to kind of really bring everything home. William Draper the third, which is Draper's actual father. Let's bring him up here. So he worked hand in hand with George Bush, and the end's going to come the Import-Export Bank. Okay, again, because William Draper III ends up becoming president of the Import-Export Bank. So already you can see that his father worked with the Import-Export Bank. So both William Draper III and George Bush were members of Skull and Bones, which he puts in the Wikipedia here. This is not me. It's just what the Wikipedia says about him here, which you'll see. We have it loaded now. So he attended Yale University with President George H.W. Bush and graduated in 1950, the year after Bush, and is a member of Skull and Bones. So here we see here administrator of the United Nations Development Program. And that other article kind of touched on it, that he had like 10K programs where he provided aid to folks. So here's that part where I was telling you he was working with George Deroit, who actually is credited with starting the venture capital industry. So let me read that. Upon returning to the United States, because he served in the Korean War, he attended Harvard Business School and studied under Professor George Deroit, who is often credited with starting the venture capital industry. So William Henry Draper's father was credited with the first limited partnership venture capital thing. But a couple years just before that, William Draper III, professor, was credited with the first venture capital company. So crazy to think about that. But you can see here, he was chairman and president of the Import-Export Bank. And that was the bank we were just talking about. And this was under Ronald Reagan. So keep in mind. So President Import-Export Bank under Reagan, United Nations Development Program, like leader, 86 to 93. Okay. And just to kind of scroll down and talk about that just a little bit, it says, as the second highest ranking individual in the United Nations, second highest, Draper oversaw nearly 10K international aid projects, which they told us in that other article, during his time at the UN and the Import-Export Bank. Okay. Draper traveled to over 101, there's 11, developing countries and met with over 50 heads of state. Under Draper, the legacy programs grew in value from 890 million to 1.5 billion in 92. So if we go over and look at Mr. George Bush here, you'll see the time like matches right up here. We'll see a couple important things here. So in 74 to 75, Bush was ambassador to China. Okay. That's going to be important later. He was also a 10th United States ambassador to United Nations. So here's the UN again. This was in the 70s. But then you see around the time that Draper's daddy, Tim Draper's daddy, William Draper III, while he's Reagan's vice president, this is when Draper gets appointed the chairman and president of the Import-Export Bank. And then when Bush is actually president, this is when Draper is the second highest ranking person of the UN. Okay. So now let's go over to the Import-Export Bank, because what we're going to learn is Bush put some policies into place where they can have more economic gain. Okay. So this is the Import-Export Bank here. We're switching tabs to it. And we see first credits to post-Soviet nations. When the Berlin Wall fell in 89-90, the USSR was dissolved in 1991. U.S. companies were able to conduct business freely within Eastern Europe for the first time since the end of World War II. And the EXIM was one of the first financial institutions to provide financing for exports to the former Soviet Union, Poland, Czechoslovakia, and the newly independent nations that emerged after 91. And remember, those were the same nations that that the grandfather, William Draper Jr. or Draper II, was rebuilding. So it's amazing to follow this back, because we now see the whole currency exchange, the whole international trading, the whole creation of businesses, the whole creation of Silicon Valley with this family. Let's continue. So in 90, President George Bush waived the Jackson-Vanik Amendment, which officially blocked normal trade relations with communist countries like China, right? Which George Bush was once an ambassador to. Okay. This is just the information. I'm not doing anything other than giving the information here. This waiver permitted all guarantee and insurance programs to U.S. companies wanting to do business with the USSR and several former communist countries. So during this time, Draper is the ambassador of this UN program, so he's able to offer aid to any of these countries. Now he's able to offer aid with this law out of the way. He's able to offer aid to Russia and China. And where does SWIFT end up being? China, right? So when Tim Draper says he did a lot of business and he got a lot done in China, that was already kind of paved for him with his father and the dealings that his father and Senior Bush were doing in China. Okay, so the XIM resumed business with Czechoslovakia in 90, and on January 25th, 91, XLM approved the first transaction to Czechoslovakia since 1947. What was happening in 1947? That was what his dad, the grandfather, William Draper II, was doing everything he was doing with the Marshall Plan. So, financed by the first Interstate Bank of Los Angeles, the guarantee allowed Ton Nat Hat Company to purchase computers from a U.S. company. And here we go, Silicon Valley, Digital Equipment Corporation of Massachusetts. Since 91, XM has supported exports to 25 of the nations that emerged after the fall of the Iron Curtain. Okay, so, and here's India too, right? Because they mentioned on that blurb, right, that Draper had gotten stuff done in India. The Draper's daddy, William Draper III. So this gets into the Obama administration. So we're going again across party here. After a visit to India in January 2015, President Obama announced that XIM will finance $1 billion of exports of made in America products. The U.S. Overseas Private Investment Corporation will lend $1 billion to small and medium-sized rural enterprises, and the U.S. Trade and Development Agency will commit $2 billion for renewable energy. Obama and Modi agreed on issues that had previously stopped U.S. companies from establishing nuclear reactors in India. So we can see India being an emerging country. We basically kind of funded that through this bank, this True Bank of America, right? And which now it kind of makes sense that we see that Tim Draper is over there with CoinDCX, which I'll bring up CoinDCX very quick. And you can see that he's so CoinDCX launches venture capital investment on CoinDCX Ventures. Okay, this is CoinDCX Ventures, but trust me, he also funded CoinDCX as well. But we'll go down here and you'll see Draper Dragons being a part of their venture arm. Whew. Okay, see. Recently, CoinDCX witnessed an oversubscribed 135 million at the 9 Series D funding round, and the cryptocurrency exchange is now valued at 2.15 billion, making it the most valuable Indian cryptocurrency company. Facebook co-founder Eduardo Savrin's B Capital, Coinbase, which we connected to Draper as well, Polychain Capital, which we've connected to Draper as well, Cadenza, as well as a few new investors such as Pantera, which we connected to Draper, which is also connected to Jed McCaleb, Stadview, Kingsway, and Draper Dragon have participated in the latest funding round. So there's multiple companies that he owns that are funding this Indian exchange that just happens to be valued as the most valuable Indian cryptocurrency exchange company. And you can see their reach in India goes back to his father and his father's father. Okay, so let's go back here. Share this tab instead. Okay, so I think that covers a lot of it. Just a quick hit. We got into more of it on that video. You guys will have to go over and watch the complete video, but I think we got a good amount of it. And just to understand this, think about Swift and what it can do, right? All of this has already kind of been put into motion. If you look at William Henry Draper III and you look at William Draper Jr., the grandfather. So when we're talking Drapers, not only are we talking Bushes, we're talking the Corporation of Rand.
If managing your crypto feels like solving a puzzle, it's time to switch to Decent Wallet. Say goodbye to complicated setups and hello to Decent Wallet, the hassle-free solution to your digital currency needs. With just a few taps, you can manage, track, and secure your crypto with unmatched ease. And here's the best part. Grab your Decent Wallet at a discounted price by using the referral link below. Don't miss out on making your crypto experience smoother and more secure.